Welcome to the Collateral Global podcast. I'm your host, Frank Armstrong, for today's session. And I'm delighted to welcome Ross Novie from all the way away in California, at least far away from here where I am in Ireland. And Ross is the winner of our photography competition that was launched last year. And his very evocative image, which you can find on the website, was the unanimous decision as the winner by the judges. So well done, Ross, and thank you. Can you give a little bit of context to that image, how it came about?
Yeah, nice to meet you, Frank, and thank you for having me on. And I was delighted to win for that photo. I'm an amateur photographer. I love photography, but I definitely got the sense that life was in a very strange place. In a way, I wish I took more photos of that time, but we didn't know if it was going to go on forever. But that trip, that photo in particular, it was a family trip in July. We went from our home in Los Angeles to up the Midwest to Yellowstone National Park up in Montana. The kids were going crazy because obviously schools had been shut. So we were doing everything possible to sort of get them outside whenever possible. And at that point, I already knew, looking at data, that the risks to young people and people my age and not unhealthy people was fairly minimal. So we wanted to go out on the road. And it was an interesting time to travel. Not a lot of people were out. You definitely saw different states dealing with it in different ways. But even in Yellowstone, when we were outside and there are geysers shooting, they had a mask policy. And that's part of the ridiculousness that kind of is captured in that photo of us just walking around masked as nature goes on, just continues to do what it's done for thousands and millions of years. And then obviously it's very moody. So yeah, it was really about taking our kids out, and it was an interesting trip, an interesting time.
And that was to Montana. That I assume is a Republican state, and yet there were mask mandates there too. I understood that in America it was very divided along partisan lines in terms of how different states responded.
It
Uh,
was. I mean, there definitely in July, it was still fairly early in the whole process. So I think some of that partisanship hadn't broken all of the rules down completely yet. But yeah, it's people had different attitudes. We ended up doing a tour of a cave in Idaho, and we were the only ones there. And our guide did not wear a mask, which was still like, we were so used to everyone being masked all the time. But he's like, we're going to go under. And I'm like, all right, it's one guy and us, like, whatever. Again, calculated risks. I'm not a daredevil, but I'm very good at calculated risks. And we go down under the cave, and he sneezes and basically puts spittle all over me. And I'm like, well, okay, I guess we all got it. We got it, but we didn't. But you know,
very good. Very
calculated
good.
risk did not work out there. But I didn't get COVID. I just got gross.
Yeah, a different reality obtained in that period, I think it's fair to say. And your own work, how is that affected? What did you do at that time? Has that changed, or did COVID change any of that?
Well, so I work in the TV and film industry in Los Angeles, and I've done that for about 30 years. I am either a producer or a director or a first assistant director, which is sort of the on-set producer. And yeah, we were shooting during when COVID broke out. We had to cancel all our shoots. But we were one of the first industries to be brought back in August, which doesn't sound very early, but for LA, that was very early. And we have a very intense workplace in terms of there's a lot of people in a closed environment for long hours, which is sort of like the exact what you don't want to be doing if you're trying to mitigate concerns. And we have, studios, multi-billion-dollar studios who don't want to be sued. So we went back and sort of retrained. We had not just masks and not just face shields, but we also had testing 5 days a week, everybody on the set, everybody on the cast, to make sure that no one was infected and then came, because if you get shut down, then you're losing, millions of dollars that you can't shoot. So there was an economic imperative to it, all this testing, but it went on for months and months and months. And it's to spend hours in in facials and masks trying to give direction at a distance to actors is difficult. But we were able to continue filming. We were declared essential workers by the state of California. I work in TV comedy. I don't know how essential that truly is, but at least I got back to work, which is good. Um, and one of the things that happened is I saw all of the preparations and logistics being done for us to get back to work. And I saw that they weren't doing that for a lot of other industries, in particular school. And I had kids who were in high school. I had a 16-year-old daughter, 14-year-old son, and I saw they weren't preparing at all to go back to school, not just for the fall of 2020, but then going into the winter of 2021. And so it was around that time that I started becoming active locally through an organization called LA Uprising that I created, because I just understood that no one was trying to get things open. For a variety of reasons, people were happy to just lay back and let the kids, especially underserved kids, suffer.
And was California one of the most stringent states, or did you have some of the harshest laws in that period in
Oh
America?
yeah, we absolutely. It was a year and a half before our kids got back to in-person learning, and I'm married to a Scottish woman, and her relatives were going back after a few months, and all of the information and data that we had, which is, you can read a book, Abundance of Caution by David Zweig, which goes into it very deeply. The data was clear that you could go back, but Los Angeles and the United States in particular can be very myopic about what other people in the world do and think like we have to solve it on our own. We can't just see what other people are doing and seeing what's right and wrong. Oh, Florida's okay, not everyone's dying. But that was impossible for people to sort of analyze without using a partisan lens, which you kind of refer to. That's quickly what happened. And really, there was no way to reopen schools until Trump lost in 2020 here, because people would not even listen to you. If they would just immediately group you as you are a Trumper or a MAGA, if you just brought up, shouldn't our schools be open? And so that's when things at least started percolating a little bit. But again, schools didn't open the whole next year.
Right. And how did you, when you started your work, your campaign to get the schools to reopen, how did other parents respond?
Well, this is one of the big disappointments of the whole COVID crisis. Was really, I mean, obviously there was disappointment in the government and sort of how they dealt with things, and certainly to the media as well, with how they just went with sensationalism every single day, just keeping the fear ramped up. But also just, with people in general. And you would think that when parents see their kids really starting to suffer, being lost in the worlds of their phone, becoming disconnected, not growing, not thriving when they should be first really in that process. And it's an important time for kids, is they're learning what they're good at, what they like. They're making friends. These are all firsts and important markers. And when you're older, you go, oh, it's just another year. But it's not. This is the development year. And in particular, again, for underserved kids who needed sports as an outlet or went to school to avoid abusive home lives. You would think parents would speak out, but they don't. And they don't because groupthink is a very powerful thing. And if people are telling you, oh, this could be dangerous, then instead of being skeptical in any measure or critical of where messaging is coming from, people just accept it, and no one wants to speak out. And so it became very scary to me to go, oh, well, first of all, hopefully this crisis ends, because at a certain point, if not, no one's pushing back, it could just go on forever. But the second thing is then you go, oh, okay, now I understand why, witches are burned and why Holocausts happen, is because no one wants to speak out,
Mm.
even when it's really obvious to, and when there's fairly low risk. Again, I'm not a wild person. I'm not like a just belligerent skeptic. I'm just a person who has a touch of skepticism and is very pros and cons. And that's partly my job. Every day I have to figure out, all right, how much time do we spend on this? What are the risks of doing a stunt this way? So it's maybe part of my calculus. But I was shocked at how much people just went around. And then if you challenged it, would just shut down and not be able to even discuss it.
So did you find you lost friends in that period? Did you feel like you were kind of shunned by some people?
We definitely got into some arguments with friends. Um, and we had friends in public health, which I thought did a terrible job overall in terms of communicating, and we're truly safeguarding people. Um, I was also in an industry that's very progressive, very liberal, and so speaking out was again, to be tagged as something then other than the groupthink was very risky. And I'm pretty independent politically, pretty what I would call centrist. But if you deviate, if you go, hey, this is weird. Why are we being forced to get boosters, even though I've already had it and had the vaccine? Like, this makes no sense. And I'm arguing with my union. You're at risk. I mean, you're at risk because people go, I don't want to work with that person. And so I definitely felt that. But my kids kind of came first, and I couldn't bear with things that don't make sense. And things that don't make sense drive me nuts. And unfair treatment drives me nuts. Like, everyone has to be shut down because we're worried about this one particular population. That drives me crazy. Maybe when you remember in kindergarten or first grade, you'd have one kid act out and they'd punish the whole class. That always drove me crazy because I was a good kid. And I'm like, why am I being punished for him? I can't control this lunatic. And I felt like this was a society-wide punishing for people. And I don't even think it was fair to be punishing anyone. That's not why government should exist. They serve us, supposedly.
Yeah. And apart from the classroom in kindergarten, is there any other comparison that you can make with what happened? I mean, have you ever experienced anything like it in the United States? Or witnessed any kind of similar mentality take hold?
Not at that scale, and certainly not having things shut down. Nothing even close. And I guess that was the part of the weird thing too, is then people just accept it and go like, oh no, it's not that crazy. It's not crazy. Every church is shut down. You can't go to the beach. They're filling in skate parks, Venice Beach. No, it's just what you do. And then I'm reading the historical literature. I'm like, no, that's not what was ever done. Not even like 1918, they shut the schools for 6 weeks. They didn't shut it for a year and a half. You're making this up. Like, people are, oh, we can just teach over Zoom to kids. What? Says who? What? No, that's insane. If you have a kid with a screen, that's impossible. Like, what are you talking about? Oh, the medical society is saying, no, babies don't need to see faces to learn connection with their parents. What? Craziness. That's insane. But then people go, well, but I see it. They're, you know, that's what it's always been. They changed the
Hmm.
definition of vaccine. That's what it always is. Like, these are
Do,
crazy
do,
things. I've never seen that.
do you think it has something to do with people not seeing one another and not actually having these conversations? And when people become atomized, they're much more easily propagandized. They're much more easily swayed by what they read because
Sure.
there aren't the critical voices like your own in the bar or in the gym or whatever, wherever you meet people. And I wonder, is that one of the significant causes of that kind of breakdown of sort of critical faculties in that period?
It didn't help for sure. And certainly everyone being siloed in their own digital spaces doesn't help, because then you don't get other information. And that's where also, like, what was the major media, like, they just all slanted to one way. And part of that is the whole Trump thing. Everything,
Mm.
it just becomes against him, regardless of
Mm. I
what's
mean,
going on. But I agree. I mean, there's a lot of social breakdown that's in there, that there aren't these third spaces where people meet, talk,
mm,
go out. But it's not like when I was on set working, it's not like these conversations were happening even as we're in the testing line, because people already had their uh their sort of
blinkers.
ideas and agenda there. So I
Mm.
mean, that's the crazy part, is most people do not actually reevaluate and think. They just don't. You just kind of, it's your religion or it's your political perspective, and no one changes ever unless it affects you, right? And so, the fact that it affected me definitely affected my politics a bit, because I saw what it was doing to my kids, and then you see the lies. Or if you work in an industry that gets reported on incorrectly, you go, "Oh, okay, wait, my eyes are opening up to something." But unless you have that, people do not open eyes.
Well, I think maybe when it comes to other issues, people feel like they understand things a bit better. But when it came to COVID, you know, people couldn't really tell the difference between a PCR test and antigen test, or you know, um, you know, the reproduction rate that we were constantly that was being talked about all the time by the experts on the podium. And politicians could sort of say, well, we follow the experts here, and that had become a bit of a narrative, hadn't it, before, during the Trump administration, particularly around environmental issues and climate change. And during COVID, in a way, we almost became a victim of expertise, or of elevation of expertise, a kind of priest-like caste of scientists who were often, you know, a minority with minorities within their own field. If you look at what the mainstream kind of view in sort of epidemiology was before COVID, it wasn't about locking down.
Right.
Uh, you know, that sort of spiraled, and it's as if, I mean, one would hope it's a singularity, that it's not something that is going to repeat itself. But you know,
I think, like, calling it priest-like, I think is exactly right, because there was no humility, and I think that was a big problem. Is because the experts, instead of, if you're truly an expert, you understand that there is some play in these recommendations, that they should be geared towards age, and they should be geared towards different things. And then the big thing is, we know this, we also know what we don't know, right? And so if they explain from the beginning, all right, we're going to do this lockdown. We think we believe this will help. This will flatten the curve. And we understand that it's violating a lot of rights. And so we don't want to do it for any more than we need to, because we know this is something that's very drastic, but we think it will help. And as soon as the information changes, we will reevaluate. That would be the proper way of dealing with it. But they didn't do that. Instead, they just kept doubling down. And even when they came out with the vaccine that they said stops it, which there was no way they could know that, because there was no long-term studies yet. So how could you possibly make that claim? That's impossible. You don't know. You don't know the long-term damage it can cause, because it's not long-term yet. You don't know. So instead of, they say, well, we have to do these noble lies because we have to tell everybody a simple message to get everyone to listen. But that's not your priority as an expert. You're supposed to be credible and believable, and you're not supposed to lead with fear, which is the other large thing that I think underpins everything and still happens today, is making everyone afraid. Because once you have fear, then it leads to anger and hatred over and over. Everyone just works off of fear, and they just kept pumping it every day, every party. You're gonna kill grandma via get together with your friends. You're gonna kill people. Your kids are gonna bring it in and kill. And after a while, very quickly, people become very irrational from fear. So, as a leader, as an expert, do not introduce fear into the equation. Otherwise, you're a bad leader. You're a bad leader. This is bad leadership.
and you say that you think it's still happening today. That a
We're
narrative.
losing democracy, Frank. We're losing democracy.
Mm-hmm.
It's
But
the end of democracy. We have to, in California, we're voting today to gerrymander our elections just so one party gets in only, even though that was not what was created before, because we're afraid of losing democracy. We are destroying the village to keep the village over and over again. And it's like, don't talk like that if you're a leader. Then bad things are going to happen if you put that into the system. Just lead. Just do the things you can do.
hmm.
I,
Except, I suppose people maybe aren't accepting the limits of power
no, that's fine. I agree, and that should be held back. I'm not giving a pass, and I don't want to get into that whole thing. But I'm just saying the message of we're losing democracy means, well, then we should. What are we doing? An uprising, a revolution? I mean, oh no, not that. Well, what are we talking about? Don't say words that aren't that escalate but don't help. So I think
Hmm.
it's the same kind of thing, and that's I hate seeing those kinds of messages
Hmm.
put in because they go in dark places that you don't know where it's going to go because some people listen to you and are crazy people.
Hmm. And your and your wife, you said is Scottish.
Yeah.
And did you visit the UK in that period? Did you get
We did
across the
not.
pond?
She did, and one of the things she found is some societies, British society, there's a lot more social cohesion and trust in authority in general, and sometimes that would mean that there are um, particular rules that might seem crazy in terms of having people over and the rules of what they could do and where they could go. But people listened very specifically to them because they were good rule followers, which is good for society in general for people to listen. But when the rules are crazy, then you start going, what's happening here? So I found that a lot of people in my LA Uprising organization who were pushing back to open schools and eventually to get masks off were actually couples that one member of the couple was from another country that had like another perspective, an
Hmm.
international perspective, uh, just to give a comparison, of
But
approach.
sorry, I'm not quite understanding. Did your wife find that that the UK was more conformist than US society?
It was
With
better
a
for
bit.
schools,
Okay.
but then they also had a lot of specific rules that seemed to fly in the face of what she seemed to be logical. So in
So
terms of
so
in particular dealing with family members and how many, like, oh, you can have three, not four. I don't know the exact rules, but it was definitely like cutoffs where it's like, okay, yes, I understand why you don't want too many, but there's no magic between the rule two
right.
or three or three or four, but people really got into that.
Okay.
And again,
Yeah.
to me, that's like, ugh, what are we doing? Come on, we're all human beings. We understand there's not some magic cliff between 2 and 3 or standing 6 feet from someone or 4 feet from someone. That's just a recommendation. That's not an actual rule of nature that people,
Mhm.
I think, got fixated on.
Yeah. I suppose, it's a fairly primitive fear that we have of disease, isn't it? That kind of goes back into our, back into history. And it was clearly triggered. And in a way, it kind of took on a life of its own. And the argument has been made that actually politicians were responding to people as opposed to the other way around. And people were sought, the authoritarian response, that
Oh
made
yeah.
them feel safer. And the politicians were kind of almost dragged into it. Now, I suppose how was that fear manipulated in the first place? It would would be one question. And do you think? I mean, you work in the entertainment business in the, which has a kind of, which influences people, in moral questions as well. And does that come up in your job? When you're writing comedy, are there areas you don't go to? Are there, things you can't say, or I mean, we all have our sort of, in any kind of conversation, in any kind of a form of entertainment, there are limits. And do you think you had a particular sensitivity to that coming from your industry?
Yeah, I mean, it's mostly groupthink. I mean, people just associate with people who think the same way, and so I think it's not so much. There aren't that many things you can't say. I mean, certainly we're like a TV comedy, so we don't want to be offensive, for our advertisers and
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
the network overall. So there's certain prudent things you want to do to stay within the fold. I mean, I think one of the things about the pandemic that drove me crazy and was also that there was very little pushback from an artistic place against what was a really extreme state of affairs. And normally you would expect when things are shut down and the man is forcing you to like stay at home, you would expect artists to fight back against that. But because politically it was complicated, there was none. And there was no art that came out of this. I mean, recently there was a movie called Eddington by Ari Aster that came out that actually did a good job dealing with sort of the craziness of that time, at least for some of it, and did a fairly decent shake of it. But there was so little talking about it artistically, creatively. I mean, Muse did a song about compliance. Like the exceptions were the rule in terms of what I saw coming. And that was incredibly frustrating because you have all these like rebels, and then you have like Rage Against the Machine, like the lead singer, Tom Morello, is the one going, "Get your shots." And I'm like, what? Rage Against the Machine is,
Well, there
working
were.
at Pharma. Like, it's crazy.
Well, Van Morrison did
Yeah.
bring an album against what was happening, but he was a bit of an outlier, and he copped a lot of flack over it. But Van Morrison,
Well, yeah, because you don't want to get flack, right? So everyone's a rebel until you really have to pay the price. And that's something that I think we talked briefly about is a lot of the people who did push back are rebels in the sense that they are just built to resist. I don't see myself as that way. I feel like I'm a little more just generally skeptical, but there's some
Hmm.
people who are just contrarian to the point of like, if you say go, I say stop. And some of them are on the crazy side, but like they were useful in this because they weren't afraid of speaking out because they almost get more power from that, is saying no to the mob.
Yeah,
But almost nobody likes saying no to the mob because you get destroyed. So why
yeah.
do
Well, as a friend of mine put it, a stop clock tells the right time twice a day. So you do rely on a diverse range of views. I think in a democracy that we do. Even if, like, I think that was one lesson I drew from COVID, is that even if I don't agree with people on a lot of other issues, I might agree with them on this. And that's kind of how politics works,
it
and how,
should?
how it
Yeah.
should work and how democracies should work, where you've got, you know, the shifting alliances in a way between different interests and different viewpoints. And out of that, you hopefully get some kind of balance, or at least people are exposed to a broad range of arguments and can make up their own mind, or make society can make the most rational decisions.
What industry are you in, Frank?
Journalism primarily, yeah.
All right. So did you find any blowback from anything you were writing?
Absolutely, yeah. It was it was it was quite disturbing, actually.
So
And
yeah, because you're in a truth-telling industry, you're supposed to go wherever the story takes you,
yeah,
but I guess not everywhere.
there were structural reasons why journalism in my country was very much supportive of the government. Well, the newspapers and the television stations were reliant on government funding, became increasingly reliant on government ads and direct funding, and so to speak out, and also people in the arts in my country were often on government grants and given decent payouts in that period. And if you spoke out, you might find that that could be, potentially withdrawn or jeopardized. So there were serious financial incentives for people, to avoid speaking out. Um, and a lot of people just say, well, I'll just kind of weather this out, and it's not, I can get on with my work. I don't have a business that's going to suffer unduly. and so and we'll get on with it. And then, but I do think that I think most people would agree, and my country also, Ireland also had long school shutdowns, and is a place quite, similar to the west coast of America. There's a lot of the same industry there that was doing very well, and I think that's another part of it that probably isn't acknowledged. That the industries, like the technological industries, new industries, all did quite well. Naomi Klein at the start of the pandemic had an article which referred to the Screen New Deal, where all the schools were integrating this new technology, where people were adopting, Zoom for work, working from home, this kind of digital transformation, which was proved highly unsatisfactory in a lot of ways and killed off, a lot of social connection and small businesses, and you know, very much suffered. But somewhere like California, obviously did, was probably doing quite well. I mean, the industry there was doing quite well. Am I right?
Certain industries, I think absolutely what you're talking about in terms of technology was, ramped up, because of its adoption. Uh, but I mean, your restaurants, bars, a lot of local stores. I mean, you still see it around the city. There was definitely a very big hit in terms of the damage economically. I mean, we're still seeing it in people, homeless and all of that. So, did you have kids, Frank?
No.
Yeah. So, that was like you're saying, they just, there's a documentary called Social Studies, which my daughter was in, where they followed kids on their screens all the time, and what that did and how that affected them, and how much, what a terrible thing it is to have kids it was like, we worked hard to get our kids outside and to sort of get them off and structure their time, but it's impossible when everything's on the screen with these. It's just a terrible idea, just on its face. Have kids,
Yeah.
especially young kids, trying to learn how to read. It's
Yeah.
impossible. It's crazy.
And crazy things like the incidence of myopia has increased among young children because babies are on screens, and obviously all of that just accelerates during COVID, doesn't it?
Right. Right. It was an accelerant, which, maybe we learned of a few lessons, or we'll end up learning lessons from it. Banning phones from schools seems to be taking off here, which is good. But
And what about I mean, were there health costs? I mean, when you talk about kids on screens, were there, I mean, obviously there's an obesity pandemic, which is, global at this stage. Was did you see signs of that getting worse, or is California maybe not a bit more health conscious than?
I don't. I mean, the obesity's there. I don't. I think that only hurt it because it was outdoor activities and all of that. I didn't see that. It's just more of the inherent evils in uncontrolled screen access, which is, when we were kids, you couldn't go to an R-rated movie, or, you couldn't get pornography unless you went to a store. You couldn't gamble unless you went to Vegas. Like, all of a sudden, we've opened the gates to all of these known ills and known addictive things and known terrible things. And so then kids just get access to it and adjust them. And and also with especially young girls, get it in terms of self-harm and how they eat and what they don't eat, and all of these social panics. So that was just all accelerated by the COVID protocols, which also, again, going back to leadership for public health, like the amount of drinking deaths went up, the amount of car accidents went up, the amount of crime went up, murders, like all of these social ills. So if you're supposed to be a leader, an expert, going back to the priesthood of the experts, you know that if you shut things down, if you make people hopeless, or you do these things, you're going to have uh, unintended consequences. And so, like, that's part of the deal. It's not like good or bad. It is, we shift here and then this comes here. It's choices. And they seem to be completely either ignorant, or they just didn't want to deal with acknowledging there were bad choices. And so just now crime's coming down. So how many people died because of alcoholism, murder, poverty, suicide, distress? How many people? So then let's add that in the tally. But no one does that.
Mm. And do you find that now in America have people moved on? Are they, is COVID still spoken about? You said that there haven't been artistic responses, even really in your own industry. Are we able to make jokes about it? What Woody Allen said about comedy is tragedy plus time is equal to comedy. So have we reached that point where jokes can be made, where kind of the theater of masks and the
A little
kind
bit,
of
but I don't know how it is for you.
stigma?
I don't feel like people really talk about it much at all. It's just becomes, oh, that was just that thing. Uh, and people would rather just move forward with whatever the new crisis of the day is. But I mean, it's always been funny to me. It's always been, and we still have people who are continuing to mask and say we are still in the pandemic, and they're permanently damaged. Like, especially in LA, like anytime there's a slight uptick, people wear masks here all the time still, outside still. So you have this permanently damaged group of people who no amount of science and time will make a comedy again for them. And there's that too. I mean, people wear masks all the time within a certain subset of people. And that
So
also should be on the ledger for these public health people. Like, that's on you. You made them afraid to the point where, like you said, people are afraid of bugs you can't see. So now they're permanently damaged because they can't live in the life we all used to live in.
so it kind of became a belief system.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't
absolutely.
think in Europe, I would say quite quickly after the laws ended, people, stopped. The masks no longer really were apparent.
So you don't see that there that much. That's
No, no, you didn't. I mean, if you see anyone with a mask, it would be very unusual. I mean, you might see someone occasionally on an airplane, or perhaps if somebody has, maybe had chemotherapy or something. But I think there's also an acknowledgement. The public health authorities would sort of acknowledge that masks are not effective. So, and
They've never said that here. They never said that. And that's another thing they should have said. It's at best a very minor help, you
yeah,
know,
yeah. I
because
mean,
then
it
you give
just.
people, these crazy people, you give them an out. There's no out. They've never said you can put
Mm.
down your masks now. They've never said that. And to me, that's like, what are you doing? Just tell people like it's okay now. Let them come back. Let them come back.
Well, there's a kind of. I think it's. There's a huge loss of credibility that ensues if these experts acknowledge how they had got things wrong. It's a bit like they said during the financial crisis that the banks were too big to fail.
Right.
The experts seem to be too big to fail in this instance.
And I
Uh,
want them to be, we need a world with expertise, and we need people who can help in crises and all of that. And so it's important. Otherwise you just get randos and nut
yeah,
jobs
no, but I
on
suppose,
X and on the internet saying things and having equal credibility. So
yeah,
I'm invested in this, but
yeah,
they
I suppose
even now they
a,
don't
a,
make up
fa-
for it.
a facet of expertise is that it's subjected to rigorous interrogation.
Yes. You shouldn't be afraid of that. That's science. Not this is the science. That's the science is challenging it, and that's okay.
Mm, yeah, and just maybe we'll bring it back to the scene of your victory, the photograph itself. So you're out on Yellowstone National Park in Montana. Um, what went on that day? That you're there's a you're is it your daughter?
Yeah, my daughter's in the front of the photo. Yeah.
It's a very captivating image. What was her mood like that day? What were the discussions around what was happening that day? Was it a feeling of liberation that you were getting out, or was it? Um,
I wish I could say that there was more happening that led to that photo at that day. Now, there's certainly all were those currents, obviously, but Yellowstone is a magnificent national park. It's amazing, and to me, like I said, I just even at that point, it was becoming crazy. We were walking around outside with with other friends who I would have thought would have been more open to just go open faced. But again, you there were other people around, and you also want to be respectful of other people at that point, right? I mean, that was part of it. It's not just like, oh, I'm going to do whatever I want. I don't care about anyone. You were still thinking of other people and not making. Well, you didn't want to like have to fight a fight every time, right? So even later on, when I became a bit more belligerent about masking, you knew if you didn't wear it in the grocery store, first of all, it's like, oh, I got to like work up the local staff who were heroes during the worst of the crisis, helping people get food. And also, I don't want to like just get in a fight over it every time, even though I think it's wrong. So it's a constant, which is this crazy place to be where you're like, how am I really going to fight for something I believe every day? Where do I fight it? How do I fight it? And everyone else is just obliviously just listening. And then if you just listen and follow the rules, you don't got to worry about any of that. You don't have to come home and yell with your wife about like, oh my God, this is driving me crazy. How are we doing this? Why are we doing this? You know, instead, just listen, strap it on. Just shut up and strap it on. Don't make a fuss.
yeah, I suppose you have to choose which hill to die on, don't you? Like,
Right. And every day is a hill.
yeah.
Every day is a hill.
And ultimately, yeah, I suppose you chose your hill was the schools. Then that was your, and I think even, people who were perfectly fine with, with masks or with vaccines or even vaccine mandates, I think most of them would acknowledge that denying children an education for a year and a half
It felt like
is
the
not a good thing.
most defensible, easy position to take,
Hmm.
right? So again, I work in this industry. I know the exposure and what the risks are, but this seemed like bare minimum. Obviously, we need these kids back in school, and even that was a massive fight that I was never satisfied with how many people even joined and supported with kids in school who were saying, oh yeah, our kids are going totally south. They're not doing well. But that still wouldn't fight for that because it was too scary, hard, whatever. So that's you're exactly right. Like, come on, this is the obvious one. And even then, it's hard to rally people to push for something that affects them and is obviously right to do.
What about the unions? Were they a big? Was that a big part of it? That the teachers themselves
The teachers, well, that was then you become your eyes are open to how things work in terms of financing. The teachers unions, this was a chance to get a lot more money, and they are huge supporters of the government, who then funnels money back to them because they negotiate the contracts. So public unions, it's a terrible setup, and they really were running the roost, and no one wanted to push back on them in California and liberal states because you get all of your money and your instant voters from them. So that was a big reason why schools didn't open. Um, our unions, I think, overstepped our entertainment unions. They definitely made it safe to go back to work, which I appreciated. But then they, again, just kept forcing you to get more and more boosters and kept masking way beyond and forcing people to do things, which I think was just beyond what needed to be done. But, you know, at least they had no role in the schools. But the teachers unions that was a terrible situation. And they failed the kids at the time when you needed people to step up. And that was part of the thing with leadership. You got to step. This was a real crisis. How do you react? And so to me, so many people just failed. This is when you're supposed to be a leader and you didn't. Okay. We got the answer, right? It's easy to be a leader when it's nothing big going on, but when it's a real crisis, you need true leaders.
And so you're not a fan of the governor then?
No.
Newsom.
No.
Who many people anticipate will be the next Democratic candidate.
I mean, it's incomprehensible to me.
All right.
He doesn't fight for anything he believes in. He just talks. He just uses words, and to him, words is the same as a faction. Terrible, terrible, and he owns it. he should own the whole thing, but no one cares because people are political first.
So, final question then, Ross. What are the lessons we can draw from this experience on a personal and or societal level?
It's a great question. Just need to be skeptical about information, an independent thinker, both evaluating the sources of information you get in and who's telling it to you. And all you can do is just push for what you think is right. And like we're saying about even schools, like usually it's not that crazy. It's usually pretty clear, but we have to push back against fear. We have to just push back against government top down telling us what things are, then when they're supposed to work for us and help us, not order us, and not fall into this what you talked about, where like we want a big daddy or big mommy to take care of us and make it all okay. That's never going to be the answer long term. It's never going to be the answer even short term. Just we have to be independent people who live together and work together, and there's going to be different voices, and we need different voices. That's the feedback loop of democracy that makes democracies better, is we hear from all different voices, and then the truth comes out.
Okay. Well, thanks, Ross, and well done again. And I hope. Do you use a digital? And what kind of camera do you use?
It was a digital Canon, a full frame, what is it, a Mark III.
Right.
So it was a nice camera with a nice lens,
Yeah.
not just an iPhone. I do like photography. So yeah, I've had a few too many photos from that time period of
Yeah.
crazy things, but hopefully we have a break from that for a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I think we should hope we can be
should hope.
confident that we'll have a break from it for a little while at least.
Yeah, let's hope.
Until the next crisis.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Ross.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.